catch my Logan roar.
This is Comic Book Lexicon. I'm Stephen Thomas.
And I'm Joshua Grand Rapids.
And we're looking at Marvel Comics Presents number 1 through 3 today. So leading up to doing Volume 2 of Wolverine, we got to look at Marvel Comics Presents 1 through 10 because it's the Buscema Claremont Wolverine story that leads up to that.
Yes.
This is published in 1988. It's written by Chris Claremont. It's penciled by John Buscema. It's inked by Klaus Janson. Lettered by Tom Orzechowski. And the colors are by Glynis Oliver. I think that's it. Okay. This is the first issue of Marvel Comics Presents.
Yes.
And what is the significance of Marvel Comics Presents?
It's one of those questions that has different answers depending on who asks. I think for your average reader, the significance is that you get a lot of in-canon stories with a character that you like that wouldn't necessarily have room to happen in whatever team book they're involved in, or would be maybe a little bit weird to put in their regular book if they had a solo title. Some stuff in here gets really weird. Maybe we'll throw that Celine video up. My analysis of this is that it's about big dicks. The industrial significance of it would be two different answers, really. It's a place for them to try mostly untested writers and artists. This is where Sam Keith got his start for the most part. Like, a lot of people got tried out in Marvel Comics Presents because that 8-page format gives you a little wiggle room with deadlines. In addition to that, this was also a convenient and cheap place for Marvel to turn some sort of profit off of inventory stories that maybe have sit in a drawer past their expiration date. Like, for instance, I think we said this earlier, if I've got a story in New Mutants where Illyana's a little girl, but she's a 13-year-old magician now in the comics, I can pull that off here.
Yeah.
That's not going to work as an inventory story if someone's behind deadline on New Mutants.
Yeah.
So, considering they've already paid for these inventory stories, they paid an artist, they paid a writer, they paid all these people, they might as well get some sort of return on that, even if it's just filler in an anthology series. There's always something good in these, regardless of the fact that they were occasionally a dumping ground for stuff that they just didn't know what to do with.
Yeah. So before we get into the story, we got to talk about the people involved because there's some significant players in this book. First of all, Chris Claremont also wrote 1982 Wolverine with Frank Miller.
Yes.
And he's like really the person who sort of defined what we know as X-Men now.
Yeah.
And then the penciler is John Buscema. So he's legendary. Started in the Silver Age, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, I think, he started in the Silver Age. He kind of picked up the gig after Kirby split as, like, he and John Romita Sr. were, like, the next best thing as far as Marvel was concerned. And they both kind of did operate in that same with Steranko. But John Buscema, as amazing as the other two guys are, quickly advanced in stature within the company to the point where he's not filling in for Jack anymore. His style is the house style to the degree that when Stan decides he wants to put out how to do comics the Marvel way, it's all John Buscema.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that happened to him was, at the time when Kirby and Stan Lee did the Fantastic Four, Kirby created the Silver Surfer. And then when they decided to turn that into an actual series, they just got John Buscema to do it instead of...
Right.
Anyways, he's one of my favorite artists. If you're talking about older artists like from that era, Kirby is almost always talked about as being number one. There's a few people you could put at number two. John Buscema is almost always in that conversation. Yes. The person who inked this, Klaus Janson, I don't know. Has a huge history, body of work. What a lot of people know him from is inking The Dark Knight Returns.
And Miller's Daredevil. Pretty much
Yes.
all the seminal Miller
Yeah.
stuff.
Which, just to give you context to when this came out, The Dark Knight Returns came out in 1986. This is 1988.
Yes.
So it's very shortly after that he's working here.
Yeah, he's very much not one of the artists that they're trying out in this. Like,
Yeah.
they're paying him good money.
Yep. So you have these, a lot of really great artists and writers. And then,
Speaking of which, Simonson cover here.
yes. And then Orzechowski and Glynis Oliver also involved in the first Wolverine series that we previously reviewed.
And Orzechowski's involved in basically anything Claremont writes because he's a very adept letterer and Claremont is not so adept at self-editing, so there's excessive dialogue.
Yep. So before we start the story, just to recap, the first Wolverine miniseries came out in 1982, Frank Miller and Chris Claremont. This comes 6 years later.
Yes.
Okay.
Does not feel like it.
Doesn't feel like it, no.
I don't mean to say it feels outdated. It just, like, rhythmically, it feels like you're picking up not too far where you left off. Some of that thanks to being the same writer, but you can't say that for all X-Men stuff.
Right.
And the classicism of Buscema's artwork makes it feel older than it is, but not at all in a bad way.
No, it's interesting too because I feel like Klaus has this the way that he inks is like this weird mix of traditional and like scratchy, but also like has a lot of traditional techniques that he uses.
Yeah, he's transporting Buscema into that Frank Miller Wolverine world.
Yeah.
Like,
okay, you ready to start?
absolutely.
Okay. So the story starts out with Wolverine, and it's the introduction to this this city that we see in a lot of these Wolverine stories called Madripoor.
Yeah.
And
Fictional city, fictional country.
Yep. And it says capital of a small island principality south of Singapore.
Yeah.
But it's fictional. Again, just talking about Buscema, there's something that he does that I find incredible. It's like he knows how to kind of shorthand everything.
Yes.
But it's like you never mistake what he's drawing. Like it's not like confusing. It's always pretty clear. Like these are just a bunch of little squares, but you just know.
Yeah,
what
you know
they
it's
are.
not a garbage dump. You know it's a slum.
Yes. Now and then over here we're in this part of Madripoor called Lowtown. Lowtown is like the dirty, grimy, crime part of the city. And the Princess Bar, which we see a lot in this story. So Wolverine is sort of like milling around here. And when we get there, these guys are holding this bar hostage. Wolverine walks in and he fights them.
And he's in Madripoor because a friend of his got killed, right?
Yes. Yep. And
A friend that we didn't meet previous to this.
no, it's just a backstory that Claremont created to put him in this scenario.
Yeah.
I like this. He, again, like you brought up before, and I think he does it multiple times, even in this short story. He talks about who Wolverine is, his powers.
Yeah.
And it always is like while he's fighting someone, it has to bring up his adamantium. But I like this. This guy's gonna hit him with a sword, and he just chops the sword in half with his hand. So he scares off the bad guys or whatever, and everyone at the bar is like happy. And he introduces himself to this person named O'Donnell.
Who's the owner of the bar.
Is the owner of the bar, and this woman introduces herself to him as well, and she's very interested in Wolverine. It says
Sapphire Sticks.
yes. Well, if you're ever feeling lonely while you're here, ... I'm Sapphire. And the owner of the bar asks Wolverine what he's doing in Madripoor. And Wolverine says, word is you want information, the place to find it is the Princess Bar. O'Donnell says, could be, depends on the question and who asks. Wolverine says, Dave Chappell sent me to find the tiger. And that's when they all pull their guns out on Wolverine, and they said, that's real interesting considering Dave Chappell is dead.
Yeah. What are you doing talking about a dead person? Nobody has people in their lives that die.
Yes, and we're all going to pull out guns on you at once.
And nobody better talk about you after this, because we'll shoot them too.
Yes.
The logic's a little off, but the drama is high, and that's what counts, I guess.
So again, Marvel Comics presents, there's a little bit of a story in each, there's, four different stories in each issue?
Yeah, it varies between 3 and 4.
Okay. So that's issue 1, or that's part 1 of the story. We're going to jump right into part 2, which starts with this bad guy with a cigarette and a white coat.
And he's Roche, who those thugs worked for, right?
Yes. Now, this is where these thugs all have...
I love that character design.
Yes. We all have to... all these thugs that were sent to the bar to fuck with O'Donnell, who was the owner of the bar. They were sent there by Roche to beat that guy up or hurt him or whatever.
Right.
They all came back, failed, and so now they all have to answer to the big boss man, whatever.
Right.
And he's ominously standing on a bridge, and they're all on their knees with some other thugs who have guns on them. And it looks like he's feeding whatever is in...
Koi pond.
Yeah.
I think that's what that little vanity bridge is for. That's probably there specifically to enjoy the koi fish, because that's just a little fjord of landscape that you could probably just walk around the pond here, but that's not as nice as hovering over the middle of it and
smoking a cigarette.
Yeah, feeding your koi fish the ash off your cigarette.
So then, the people who failed, they're begging Roche to give them another chance, and this is where we meet this character named Razorfist. Now, what's interesting about this whole Wolverine, independent of the X-Men, is I feel like Claremont was really intentionally trying to keep Wolverine out of his suit. Claremont
and Buscema both stressed in the press and any of the solicitations that led up to this, that this was high adventure.
Yeah.
It was like a pirate story. It was like a detective story. It was not like a superhero story.
Yeah.
Oh well.
But this is what, they go out of their ways, there's crime bosses and pirates and bars and things like that. And then the big bad goon in this story is this character named Razorfist, who's very much dressed like either a wrestler or a supervillain, whatever you want to think of.
Maybe you can... I mean, wrestling is huge in Japan. Maybe he's a disgraced wrestler.
Yeah.
That had just happened to hyper elaborate his gimmick once he started working for crime. But yeah, he strangely fits in a superhero universe for an action adventure story.
Yeah. But anyways, Razorfist kills all these thugs except for one of them who gets free, and it starts approaching Roche. He's like, you're going to be my ticket out of here. I'll gut you where you stand.
You pointed this panel out earlier when we were looking at this before we recorded. It is ominous, like they're going to eat him.
Yes.
But I think Buscema just did this because it's a pretty panel, but it's koi fish aren't scary.
Yeah.
No. Little kids reach in their little baggie of Cheerios and drop them in the water and they'll eat that.
But it is, and they make this guy out to be really pretty scary because, this is very movie dialogue stuff right here. But in another sense, you are quite correct. I shall indeed be your ticket out of here, from this world to the next. Then he breaks his neck and he drops him into the water. Now he addresses Razorfist as being what I can gather is a hired gun. I don't think Razorfist has his allegiance to Roche is based on he's an employee, more or less. Now we're back at the Princess Bar, and this is where we get the explanation of who Dave Chappell is, who O'Donnell is, and stuff like that. It turns out that Wolverine was investigating the torture and death of this character, Dave Chappell, right?
Right.
Now, as he's figuring it out, somehow it leads him back to here. And in Chappell's possession, he has this little locket with a picture of it. It's like a memento that he's supposed to bring back to O'Donnell.
Right.
Okay. So then it's sort of O'Donnell's not sure if he trusts Wolverine or not. So he's got the gun pointed to him. And then this is more Wolverine.
Little 38 special.
Yeah, there's more Wolverine stuff where he's like, he wants to test me, but he's too smart. He realizes that I'm an animal, blah, blah, blah. Now, that Sapphire character, Sapphire Sticks, the woman who's attracted to Wolverine, or that's the impression that we get, is talking to him. While she's talking to him, he senses something, and he says, figure in the doorway, something awfully familiar. And we see this figure, and now Wolverine's going to follow her. Now, when he finally confronts her, he's like, I know you. And it's this character.
Jessen Hone.
Yes.
Apparently an English first name, but Hone is a Vietnamese name that means basically like powerful superhero.
Yeah. And that's the end of the second part of the story. That brings us to part 3. JR. So he confronts Jessen Hone. This is where Wolverine recalls who she is exactly. It turns out she's the daughter of a family that owns this bank, like this financial institution in Madripoor. At some point, the Reavers, which are like X-Men villains.
Yeah, at this point, I mean, we should probably hit pause for a second. At this point, the X-Men are assumed dead because they fought in a battle in New York City against a supernatural foe where they did die. But this kind of like cosmic goddess character decided that death was something that she could not abide, brought them back to life, and basically said, I'm going to make you impervious to electronic surveillance so everyone will continue to think you're dead. You're responsible for the rest, so go somewhere and hide. But don't worry, here's this magic mirror, the Siege Perilous, which they say the Siege Perilous of legend in here. The Siege Perilous was a seat in King Arthur's table. So like that term is from legend, but not in the sense of like, here's this magic mirror type portal that when you step through is going to judge your character and reset time and do all this weird stuff that we can basically guarantee anyone that goes through it is not going to remember things.
Yeah.
But regardless of the semantics, that's why they're given this. So it's like if they meet anyone and they're buckled down to the option of like, do we let this person live? Do we keep them prisoner forever? Or do we just wipe their brain? Still not humane, I don't think, but...
So the Reavers kidnap Jessen Hone, right?
Yes.
And they go back to Australia, which is where the X-Men find her and rescue her. And at that point, they're trying to remain covert, the X-Men, right? And so they have to decide what to do with this Jessen Hone character. And they decide to send her through this...
Siege Perilous.
The Siege Perilous. And by sending her back, teleporting her back to her home and going through the Siege Perilous, her memory of them is wiped out. That's sort of what I gathered. Okay.
But also a lot of her memory of herself.
Yeah. That is... It's like such a straightforward like adventure crime story, and then you hit this part and you're like, whoa, okay. So they send her back, and so that's why she doesn't recognize Wolverine at all, and he's like trying to talk to her, and she's trying to escape. So she hits him with some powder in the face and takes off. He gets hit by a car. Looks very cartoonish.
Yeah.
Anyways, she then, as she's running away, she throws someone off their motorbike and jumps on and takes off. Wolverine almost catches her.
That looks like a lawful commandeer to me. I don't
Yeah.
know what you're talking about.
Now, when Wolverine comes to, Sapphire Sticks, the woman from the bar, is there, and she's like trying to talk to him, and he's sort of like, "I got somewhere else to be."
Yeah.
But she kind of grabs him and kisses him in the mouth, and he can feel his strength in his life kind of like being sucked out of him.
Yeah.
So
So apparently the whole reason she's been interested in him is some sort of vampire radar has told her that he's got the juice.
Yeah.
And she's gonna jam a straw in the box.
Yes. Now, as he's like, he tosses her off, but he's like stumbling away. And then we see the character Razor Fist who grabs him. And then, we realize that Razor Fist and this character Sapphire Sticks are going to turn Wolverine over to the boss man, Roche.
Right.
Roche. And that's where part 3 ends. And that's where we're going to end this video and pick up with parts 4, 5, and 6 in the next video. All of our information is in the description of this video. My Instagram, Josh's Instagram, and the Instagram for this channel.
Yeah.
And if you haven't seen, we have the Wolverine video that we did first is also on our
A
channel.
whole set of Wolverine videos.
Yeah.
We got one each for the 4-issue mini-series that is known as Wolverine Volume 1.
Yes, Frank Miller, Chris Claremont, Wolverine. So, all right, guys, thanks for watching.
Thanks.
Taserface.